Hello, James here with Dakota Modelers Group. Still driving across the state. There's one other subject I wanted to knock out before I got over to Jordan's, and that's kind of the subject of mentorship. Specifically, one mentor that I knew for quite some time. His name was Rick Mills. We unfortunately lost him back in April of this year. He died young. He was only 60 years old when he passed away. And over the last few months, it's been hard to keep going. It's been hard to find joy in this hobby. It's been hard to, run the museum up there at Hill City in his place. Every time I see something interesting, or if I have a great idea, I'm so used to just telling Rick about it that I turn around to go tell him the idea, and then I gotta stop myself and remember that he isn't there anymore. At least not in a way where we can see and interact with him in any way. I know his family's been taking the hit pretty hard, so don't worry so much about me on that. I would rather people send prayers to Rick's family. Rick himself didn't have any kids, but he's got a niece and he's got a nephew. His niece, Sarah, is same age as me. We both were kind of at the museum in the early days of that new facility. Sarah had gone on to work for the 1880 train for a season or two, and I just kept coming back up there as a volunteer. And then Sarah's got a little brother. His name is Jesse. I haven't seen Jesse in quite a few years now, but last I had heard from him, he's doing pretty well for himself. Even so, I know that the loss of Rick there hit him pretty hard as well. Rick was just a fantastic uncle to those two kids. And really, it's hard to convey this in a video, but if I were to ever become an uncle myself, Rick is definitely the model I would want to work off of. Like, he did so many things right, it's just amazing what he was doing. But anyway, this video is not really about Rick's family. It's more about mentorship. So, I've been lucky in life to have quite a few mentors over the years. Rick, though, he's right there at the top, honestly. Rick, he was such a kind person. He was so patient. He was intelligent. He was educated. He's everything you wish a person could be. And I do mean that. He's not a perfect person. Nobody is. But as human beings go, Rick really was up there. So, my history with Rick goes back about 15 years now. So, when I was 15 years old, I'm 30 now, but when I was 15 years old, I had just moved to South Dakota from Minnesota. My mother got a new job teaching, so we were living in a small town south of Rapid City called Hot Springs. And ever since I could remember, I had been fascinated with trains. I was starting to also express myself through model railroading. Model trains, there's a lot of talk out there about whether it's a craft, a science, or whatever have you, but really it's an art form. And Rick himself really wasn't a modeler, but Rick was a historian. He was a rail fan. He had a lifelong love of trains, same as me, and that was something that we connected over. Anyway, so my mother wanted me to go do something other than just sit around the house or wait to get a job. So she had me go up to Hill City, and we had walked into the museum right at the end of its first season of operation. The museum as an organization existed since 1994. Rick had been part of that museum since around 2004, if I remember correctly. But he had become the museum's director in 2010. And when we walked into that museum, there really wasn't a lot in there. There was a lot of artifacts just kind of scattered about, but you could tell it was a museum in its very early stages. There wasn't a caboose there. There was only just starting to be a model train display coming together. There was a bunch of donated items, but even so, it was a museum. And Rick there, he was right at the center of the action. He was getting things ready. He was already preparing for the first Trees and Trains event. And, sorry, remembering a lot of this brings out the feels. Anyway, so I'm standing there with Mom, and we're just looking through the museum. And I'm not like most kids. Most kids, they go and they see something interesting, and then they're on to something else within, I don't know, a few seconds. Sorry, there's a turtle on the road there. But with railroad museums, I've always had a tendency to slow down and take in as much information as I could. Anyway, we were there for a couple of hours, and then my mother got to talking with Rick, and she decided it would be a good idea if I were to volunteer at that museum. And so that's what I started doing. From my freshman year of high school onwards, I'd been volunteering at the South Dakota State Railroad Museum. And I cut my teeth on a lot of different skills at that museum. You know, one thing I remember doing early on was building a model of the Hot Springs Depot. It's still in existence, the model and the real thing, but you can tell it was definitely made by a teenager. Even so, Rick was proud of that. Really, there's a lot of people where they feign being pride, but in this case, he really was proud of that. It's unbelievable to me that he even kept that thing. I would have thrown it out. Like, it doesn't have that much sentimental value to me. But here, Rick saw that what this teenage boy did, and he kept it. Like, I'm not even related to him, and yet he did that for me. All right, I gotta make a turn here. Hopefully the camera won't knock over. Nice and easy. I'm still a little bit new at doing this video thing, so I'm not quite sure if the camera will stay up if I jolt the car around too much. And where was I? Oh yeah. So he saved this model depot, and to this day, I'm just amazed by that. Even better, he had put the thing out on display. And I've made other things for the museum over time too. I made a Lego model of a diesel locomotive. I didn't use instructions or anything. I just kind of looked at a picture of one of the local engines and tried to replicate it as best I could with what I had on hand. He kept that thing in that museum for, I don't know, 5-6 years. It's astonishing, really. But in addition to that, Rick was always there to educate me. Now, Rick, if you haven't met him, it's hard to explain, but Rick was pretty much a human encyclopedia of railroads in South Dakota. He knew pretty much everything that a human being could know all in one brain. Now, there's definitely things he didn't know, which is fine, but as just a single human being with one brain, he was committed to mastering that particular topic. Honestly, if he had better education and if there was a degree related to railroad history, Rick would be the professor emeritus, or whatever you would call it. He would be the top level guy you'd want to have. So Rick, that whole time, the library was growing. He is exposing me to all these different books on different railroad subjects. And honestly, I can barely keep up with them myself. I'm not an academic by any means. However, Rick was always there to encourage me to learn more. And at the time, as a teenager, I didn't really see why. However, as a 30-year-old man, now I can look back and I can see exactly what he was doing. He was teaching me, and he was also teaching any other volunteer that was around the same age that was coming through, all about these railroads, because he wanted to pass that knowledge on to another generation. Rick also had gone to become an author right after his own stint in college. He wrote about 8 or 9 books himself. He co-authored another handful of books. And he had been a consultant on a couple of others. So over time, he's become kind of like the pinnacle author for railroads in this region of the country. Now, after I had graduated high school, I still kept in touch with Rick. And I don't know, maybe it was just the comfort factor, but I kept coming back to that museum and I kept wanting to help in some way. And Rick didn't really have to convince me with a lot of things. All he'd have to do is say, hey, if you're in the area, here's what we got going on. I would show up and I'd help with what I could. I made mistakes. I screwed plenty of things up, teenager, young adult, you make plenty of mistakes. But Rick was never the kind of person to get angry or to be short with people. He really was, like, if a human being could have the patience of a saint, Rick was it. He really was. In fact, I'm astonished that he lasted as long as he did behind the desk at the museum taking tickets from people. Because I've done retail before, I've done customer service before. I know how hard that can be at times. And Rick, that was never really his career path, and yet he mastered it. So anyway, pheasant. So anyway, after high school, I kept coming back to that museum, and I kept trying to help out Rick. And every time I would be there, Rick had something new for me to learn about. Where this all started to accumulate into kind of becoming an asset to the museum was around 2018. And that is when Rick organized the Chicago Northwestern Historical Society's annual meet. The society is based, I believe, in Illinois, maybe. But anyway, the Historic Society came out here for their annual meet in Rapid City. And Rick needed somebody that could help with tech services. And that's kind of what I was doing throughout that whole event. As I was plugging in cameras, I was hooking up computers, I was running slideshows, that kind of thing. I had also gone up to the museum. I had helped out up there when they had people coming through the place. I didn't really participate in a lot of the events, but I was still there to help out wherever I could. And I could see that Rick really did appreciate me being there. There was another time too, this had been right after I had gone to college on the east side of the state. I remember going to a train show just to see Rick. It was down there in Sioux Falls. Anyway, so I go to that train show. I got my own little display set up, but I'm walking around and I'm meeting people. I ran into Rick, of course. Rick was doing his lecture, but we had got to talk over lunch right about then. And I had voiced regrets that, I'm sorry, Rick. I'm sorry I had to move away. I'm sorry that I'm off doing this thing. Rick stopped me then, and he refused to let me apologize for that. He told me that I have to go out into the world and do what I have to do. That the museum would be fine, it would be okay, but when and if I come back, that museum will still be there, and I'm a part of that place. That's what Rick told me anyway. So it just goes to show you what kind of a man Rick was. And honestly, I'm going to miss that man for the rest of my life. I know there's a lot of other people that are going to miss him too. Rick was the kind of person where everybody would call him a friend. But I feel very lucky that for 15 years I got to know Rick Mills. And he's left a legacy that is way too large for any one person to pick up. There's not going to be another Rick Mills. There's not going to be another person that knows as much about railroads as him. And there's not going to be another person that can be in as many community organizations as him. It's just not possible. I suppose someone one day might be able to get up close to where Rick was, but for the people that are around us right now and the people that knew Rick, none of us can touch him in a lot of ways. That being said, there are different parts of his legacy that I think people are going to be able to pick up and run with it. Now the museum, I'm still going to be part of that for the foreseeable future, and I hope that while I'm there, I can make changes that are going to improve that museum, ensure its future success for whoever inherits it. But as for myself, the piece I feel like I could be able to pick up and carry on in Rick's memory is going to be with the modeling, and it's going to be with writing, and it's going to be with talking about the history of railroads in South Dakota. There are plenty of people that know more than me about history, so I'm not sitting there thinking, oh yeah, he trained me for this specific thing. He didn't do that. He didn't know he was going to die at age 60. Like, no, who thinks of that? Who predicts it? Like, the rest of us were shocked. I'm sure it was just as much of a shock to Rick when he, I don't know if he had a stroke or a heart attack or whatever, but either way, he must have known right at that last minute. He went, oh shit, or something like that. But there wasn't a plan for that kind of thing. And I suppose one of the lessons there is, as a contingency, we should have a plan of sorts for the museum in case that ever does happen again. Although hopefully it won't. That's one of those things where you got to be prepared for it, but you hope to God you never have to use it. Anyway, so books, history, photography, there's a whole story out here to be told about railroads in South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa. This whole region of the country just has such a rich history. And without Rick here, we're going to need to have people that can pick up that piece and carry it forward. I don't think I'm going to be alone in that adventure, but I am willing to start out. I don't have much in the way of ideas at the moment, and this video is not really going to be the place where I start advertising that anyway. But I guess the point of this is that I really hope that anybody who watches this, you find somebody like Rick in your life. Somebody who is such a fantastic mentor that when they're eventually gone, you'll miss that person dearly. I miss him as much as I would my own uncle or grandfather or, some other close relative. And Rick was that to a lot of people. It really is surprising. He did not have a big family himself as far as biologically related people, but for a family that he built, there's a lot of people around that knew him. And there's a lot of people that felt that he wasn't just a family friend, but he was part of their family in some way. That's going to be another part of Rick's legacy that I hope people pick up and carry forward, because really it's beautiful. Like, I have to keep myself from crying just thinking about that, even 3 months later. Anyway, I'm not sure if this video is going to be up before Rick's service, but I'm not going to be making a video for that, obviously, out of respect for Rick's family and his own memory. I'll snap a couple of pictures for myself, but I have a suspicion it's going to be a really big event. Anyway, take care. I hope you go and find that mentor in your own life.